So let's begin. Welcome, good morning. It's so nice to have so many of you today in this webinar. This is our very first East of England Mental Health Conference for Sport and Physical Activity. My name is Alicia Polak. I'm a Health Project Officer at Heart Sports Partnership. And today's conference is being delivered as part of the East of England Mind Regional Network Hub. So yeah, not to keep you waiting any longer. Let's just go through some housekeeping for today. So if you could please keep yourself muted at all times. If you could also keep your video off, please. This meeting is being recorded, and also questions. So if you've got any questions for Richard, please pop them into the chat box and we'll pick them up at the end of the session. Also to make you aware, this session may contain some sensitive content. So if you find any of this triggering, please feel free to leave the session and come back whenever you're ready. Please also let me know if I can be of any assistance or help today. And support available. You know, if there's anyone you need to talk to about, you know, the events of today, or feel like you might need some support, here are some of the helplines that you can access. So I'm just going to pause here for a minute if anyone would like to take a screenshot or take a photo. Okay, and just to kind of draw a picture, what we're doing today. So as I've mentioned before, this event is held as a part of the East of England Mind Regional Network Hub, which is funded by Sport England through Mind. The program aims to bring together sport, physical activity and mental health organizations in the Eastern region. We are here to share best practice and updates, increase collaboration and partnership working across the region. And we are working very closely with 5 active partnerships in our patch. So that's Active Essex, Team Beds and Luton, Living Sport, Active Suffolk and Active Norfolk. So our program will continue until end of March 2021. So please feel free to get in touch with myself. My contact details should be on the next slide. So that's me. So now I'm going to pass over to Richard, who's going to talk to us about GoVox.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody can hear us okay. Not daunting at all, joining a call with everybody's camera off and mine on. So thank you, Alicia, for the introduction, and thank you for the admin stuff there. Very strange just having my my pretty face on the screen. So I'm going to save you all and share my screen because I've got a couple of slides to go through with you today. I think we've got an hour together. Hopefully it'll be an hour that will be of use to all of you. We're really proud to have been invited to come and deliver one of these sessions. My colleague Ollie is on the chat at the moment and will be throughout this morning's session, mainly to try and drive a little bit of interaction. I know it can be a little bit daunting having someone talking at you for 45 minutes to an hour or however long we go on with this session. So if you've got any questions, anything that comes up, just please feel free to interact with Ollie on there because he likes to interact with people, and also it will hopefully help pick off some things as we go through. So thanks to the Hearts team for inviting us along. They've been a big part of our journey at GoVox, and quite a large chunk of today is going to be to share with you our journey, because hopefully it will resonate with you as to why we do what we do as an organisation. So without further ado, I'm going to start to click through these slides because I have control. So GoVox, I mean, I don't know if any of you have done any research prior to this session about GoVox and who we are and what we do. Hopefully if you have, you might have found a nice website that kind of talks a little bit about what we do. And you may well have come across some colleagues or some partners within your organisations that actually utilise the GoVox suite of propositions, predominantly our wellbeing check-in. We are the wellbeing technology partner for Heart Sports Partnership, and also we've had a lot of support and coverage with the active partnerships at a national level as well. And what we find is that the more we can interact with people and share with them kind of what we do and why we do it, the better for us. And that's why today is a big opportunity for us. So for those of you that have done the research, or those of you that haven't, have come cold to this call about GoVox, just to share with you kind of the story behind why we do what we do and where we came from. So we started back in 2018, and I've got a bit of a slide coming up in a moment. I'll just flick forward to it, then I'll flick back about our journey. We actually were founded in October 2017, but when you start any organisation, it does take a few months to kind of get off the ground and go from an idea to delivery, and then we've very much had an amazing couple of years, to be fair. But the start of our story starts in a bit of a dark place. My big interest outside of work and family has always been rugby. It's always been, apologies, I'm putting myself off here. It's always been an area of my life. It's been the sport that I've kind of played. Most of the chaps that I've played with will probably tell you I played it poorly. But for me, it's never been about the level of competition and the achievements on the pitch. It's been about being part of a community and having a network to grow up with and to go through the good times and go through the bad times together. I'm older now, and I've played rugby since I was a schoolboy many moons ago. I know you might find that surprising if you've got your cameras on, but that's just down to good skincare, I can promise you that. Always played it through into my adult life. Really heavily involved when I had children as well, to get them involved in the rugby club. And I was really proud when I kind of stopped playing rugby at any kind of meaningful level, to take over as chairman of the local rugby club in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. Sounds very grand, but really it's a volunteer role. I'm sure you're all very used to whatever the sport and whatever the local club, the chairman, the people that take on those responsibilities. It's a huge honour, but it just mainly means you get moaned at more than anybody else, and you have to do the dirty work when it's required, and you take that responsibility on. But for me, it was a really important responsibility to take on, because I had got so much out of being part of the rugby community. So I was chairman of Hitchin Rugby Club. I was chairman for 5 years. I'm still actively involved with the club, looking after our academy at Hitchin Rugby Club. But whilst I was chairman, we were approached by another local rugby club, not a million miles away from us. Our interaction to that stage had always been good battles on the pitch and good times in the bar. And like a lot of local sports clubs, be it rugby, football, cricket, hockey, whatever, the community spirit was as strong in their club as it was in ours, and as we see across. But they actually shared with us some pretty difficult news that they'd actually lost a couple of players to suicide over a period of 12 to 18 months. And they're a great club led by great people with a great atmosphere, but you can imagine that was incredibly difficult for them to deal with. So they'd supported their people brilliantly, and they were coming to us as a rugby club to say, look, we want to take this on a step further. We want to make sure that these things happen less in local sports clubs, but in society in general. And they really got us thinking about what support we deliver for our members. We'd always prided ourselves on creating an environment where people could be physically looked after. Rugby is obviously a physical sport, and we'd created that right environment. We had physios, we had first aid, we had nutrition plans, we had all of that great stuff. But were we really looking after the mental well-being of our members? At the same time, personally, and I always share this story with a bit of embarrassment, my involvement with mental health and well-being up until that point had been kind of product of my time, really, kind of grammar school education. I work in a very male-dominated environment. Obviously, the sport that I had chosen was a very male-dominated sport. And there was kind of a bit of an undertone for my 25 years as a leader in all of those arenas. The approach had very much been, everyone has a bad day, mate, get over yourself. And I mean that embarrassingly. But that was really the culture that I kind of grew up in, and my peers and organisations that I was part of had kind of instilled into me. So at the same time as having the difficult news to share at a local rugby club level, in my day job, senior manager in a rather large organisation responsible for a number of people, we experienced a couple of what I would call near misses. And they were cases where individuals didn't turn up for work. And when we actually found out the reason why they didn't turn up for work, it was linked to some kind of mental health challenge that had driven them to what I would call a personal crisis moment. And in a couple of cases, these were attempted suicides. So that was very difficult to understand. Me personally as a leader, as I say, 25 years in leadership roles, I started to question my role in that. The cases that I started to understand more about, the issues that had driven them to take drastic action, had built up over a long period of time. In the main weren't related to work. They were related to issues that were going on in their life outside of work. And it really dawned on me, and I can still remember the weekend back in 2017 where I love my sleep, but I had some really sleepless nights, really kind of questioning my involvement in kind of being responsible as a leader for people that I'd kind of missed their need and their opportunity to support them. So I'm quite a proactive guy and turn that into looking at what support is available in the organisations that I'm a part of and wider to help people when they come across these types of issues. And obviously mental health can be incredibly broad. I wouldn't say I'm anywhere near an expert on mental health and well-being. The last 2 to 3 years have been a very sharp learning curve for myself. And what we identified is when we got together with a whole group of leaders really from across sport, education, industry, corporate level, small businesses, large businesses. We really started to dig in and have some really honest conversations at a leadership level about what support was available. Now, in short, and I do apologise, I do waffle on a bit with this, and feel free to jump in the chat if I'm waffling a bit too much, and that's not an invitation for you, Ollie. I know you've heard this story many times. But for me, and the group that we started to look into the support available, actually what we found is that there is a lot of support available, and it was increasing almost on a weekly basis. People investing in mental health first aiders, organisations understanding the need to understand people's mental health and well-being on parity with their physical health and well-being, which was really pleasing for us, really pleasing that the support was there. And we were able to bring in a lot of support from the likes of Mind in Mid-Hearts were huge to help for us in the rugby community and continue to be so, linking in with Heart Sports Partnership and some of their partners and kind of picking up some of the things to fill some gaps that we felt that we had in our organisations. And that was a really great exercise to go through because it was proactive, and it felt like we were making a difference. On reflection, the one thing that we identified that was missing was actually support for the leaders of those organisations. So I've got a bit of a quote that you've been staring at on the screen for a while, that I kind of that sums my view of this really, that when we become leaders and influencers, so whether that be the captain of the rugby team or the hockey team or the football team or the swimming club captain, whether that be a leader in a school environment, whether that be a manager in a workplace environment, when we take on those roles, we aren't sprinkled with some kind of magic dust, which means we have a sixth sense that can understand exactly how people are feeling. We live in an environment and a society where actually people are quite closed face to face with their personal emotions unless they know you incredibly well. The thing that resonates with me with that is that if we were out for a meal, I mean, there's about 18 of us on here, so first off, that'd be quite expensive, and also against current guidelines. But if we were out for a meal and we were enjoying the food, and I don't know, I might say, oh, Joe, this steak feels a bit tough, or these veggies are a bit undercooked, we would have that conversation in the group that we're with. But in the majority of cases, once the waiter comes over or the server comes over and asks that classic question, is everything okay? The majority of us turn around and go, yeah, it's lovely, thanks, brilliant, lovely, thanks. And we kind of move on because we're not that open face to face with people. But you only have to kind of dip into your social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any of those platforms. And we've got a society that starts to really open up on a screen. And look at us now, me on a screen chatting away to you on a Zoom call. But we found this real confidence in opening up and expressing ourselves via a screen, via these things that we carry around in our pockets all the time. So we focused on bringing those elements together and targeted ourselves really to say, how can we create a way for the leaders, for people with a responsibility for a group of people, to be able to tap in to their audience quite quickly and be able to pull out who needs their support. And really, the line I use is that on a Monday morning, who would most benefit from a cup of tea and a chat? I mean, over the recent months, that's probably turned into who would most benefit from a personal Zoom call and a chat or a Teams call. But what we're finding as well through COVID is all of these issues have absolutely kind of increased. And when you've got your cameras on, you might finish a work call or a team call and you'll have that little wave at the end. And that's kind of your finishing gambit to the people you're on the call with. But you don't really know what's going on behind and in their mind. So GoVox brings all of those elements together. And later on within this session, I'll explain to you exactly how it does it. And actually, it does it in a really simple way. And that's part of the benefit of GoVox, really. But it enables people to identify early signs so that they can prioritize the conversations that matter. And that's a term that came to us from one of our very first clients. And I'll get to that later on as to where that came from, but really about prioritizing the conversation that matters. Because if you've got a team of 5, 6, 10, 12, 20 people that you're responsible for in whatever guise you are responsible for them, you can't speak to them all on the same day. You don't know who to prioritize first. In the old world, you might well have prioritized them based on some kind of performance metric from the previous week or the month, because that's where your focus is at as a leader making a difference in your organization. So that's really what GoVox was founded to do. It's a technology platform, and I'm not a technology guy, just about work this call for us. We've got a superb group behind us that kind of support this on a technology level. So we'll get to what it does and how it works, but that's really a bit of the why. So if I was to summarize why we do this, well, fundamentally, we do it to save lives. We do it to make sure that people have a voice and that leaders are supported so that they can feel empowered to support their people with all of the great support that's available through their organizations already. So GoVox won't replace what you do today or what you might introduce tomorrow, but it will help you target it effectively and make sure that your resources are being maximized to their full effect. So a bit of a timeline for us, because it's something that I'm incredibly proud of. And I mean, we could have put a load of timelines on here, time points. So as I mentioned, October 2017 was kind of our birth, if you like, and that was the starting conversations. In February 2018, the GoVox Wellbeing sent its first ever check-in. That was a big moment for us. I've got a picture of it on the wall in the office when I'm in there. In January 2019, we started our full year, because I don't know if anyone on the call has ever been involved in a startup organisation. It was certainly my first go at it, and yeah, that was big for us, because we got to our first year and we actually sent over 250,000 check-ins across sports clubs, schools and corporate organisations in that first year, which was incredible, really. Another proud moment for us is that we were actually name-checked in the Houses of Parliament and linked with the NHS via an organisation that's within the NHS called the NHSX. Now, the NHSX is about bringing new technology into the NHS at pace, which makes me smile, because we went live with them in November 2019, and we are just about to have our first conversations about rolling out into the wider NHS. But actually, any of you that have dealt with large organisations, that's actually quite swift, and I think gives real credit to kind of how we work as an organisation and how our platform works. And then actually during COVID, we had a lot of clients already. We had a lot of clients make very quick decisions because they realised that they were further disconnected from their people and that they had further concerns they wanted to support. And in the first 10 weeks of Covox, we actually sent over 1 million touchpoint questions within our wellbeing check-in, and that enabled over 80,000, and we call them conversations that matter. And later on, when I get through to show you how it all works, those touchpoint conversations that matter, they are what we term kind of red flags. So, that will resonate when we get to that later on in the presentation. So, I'm just trying to see how I can move on. Yeah, here we go. I told you I wasn't techie. So, why Govox? Nice slide that just built together there. I might do that again later. I quite like that. So it's tech enabled. This is getting into a bit more about kind of actually what it is. So I've waffled on and hopefully not bored you to tears too much about why we do what we do. We're very passionate about why we do what we do, and it's not a story that I will tire of telling. So, but what is it? So it's tech enabled. So it's actually a system that was built from the ground up internally by the Govox team. Not myself, as you just noticed. I couldn't even move the slides on, but we've got a fantastic team that built it. It's a proactive wellbeing support system, and by that I mean it's not an app that you download onto your phone. It's not a resource that you decide you want to go out and access. It actually proactively reaches out to you through the process, normally on a monthly basis, but during COVID we've actually reduced that down for a lot of organisations because the world is changing so quickly. But it's proactive. It reaches out and it drives engagement. We have something like a 75% engagement rate with the tool, which is a little bit mind-blowing if you work in things like comms and internal comms specifically. It provides insight in real time for support that's needed. So we'll get to that in a bit, and I'll show you some of the screenshots of kind of some of the management information that the leadership get. It's about doing things quickly and easily and simply so that leaders and organisations or wellbeing leads or team leaders, managers or whatever, we don't want to take up any more of their time on admin, reading reports, accessing reports, etc. We want them to be able to find out what they want quickly and easily and apply that time that they've got and that resource that they've got to actually making the difference and having the conversation. So what we've found working with organisations, and we had another one through today, but we've actually been shortlisted for quite a number of awards in the last few months, actually, both in the school sector, but also in the corporate sector. We find that by helping bring the conversations forward for clients, it's starting to reduce the cost of mental health, poor mental health in organisations. And I know it's very difficult to associate a cost to people's mental health and well-being, but organisations have budgets and they're there for a financial reason in the majority of cases. Those of them that aren't, like the local sports clubs, they still have a budget to meet. And what we find is that our tool brings those conversations forward, and actually by very light touching on the areas of mental health and well-being, things like loneliness, anxiety, stress, connectivity, all of those sorts of things, it enables people to have the earlier conversation, to have the earlier intervention, so that actually it doesn't become a personal crisis moment. It doesn't become a point where heavy involvement is required from sort of serious mental health professionals, and they do a fantastic job. So the best example I use for this is that if we all, and I think there's about 16, 17 of us on the call at the moment, if we all worked in an office or in an environment together, we would probably have one of us would be nominated to be the physical first aider, and that's great. We would be trained up to a certain level of medical care. If somebody walked into our office and fell over and bumped their elbow, we would see that they needed us, we would be able to act. If it was something more serious than our training enabled us to do, then we would get on the phone and we would call the ambulance, and we would do our bit to that point for what we're trained to do. But it's visible, we can see it. We can see if someone's had a bump, had a scrape. having a physical challenge. What we would also do, and brilliantly at the moment, is we would start to invest in a mental health first aider or some kind of first aider training, some kind of first response training within our organisation. And that's brilliant. We would be trained, we would feel great about that. But actually, we would sit back into our environment, back as a group, let's use the office analogy again, and we wouldn't really know who needs us, because actually people don't come in with a bump and a bruise with mental health. They carry a lot of it on their shoulders and internally, obviously. And we'd probably at the moment only really know there's a problem if someone had got to the point that they were actually struggling to the point that they couldn't cope. They were either absent or presenteeism, so they were there but kind of not really with it. And we would physically see it. We would see that someone's down, and we would have that conversation. And in the extreme of cases, we would have the scenario that I talked about at the very start, where somebody actually completely by surprise decides to take an action that could be quite sort of damaging and final for them. So what the GoBox system does is it gives that bumped elbow view to the mental health and wellbeing support within an organisation, because it's instant, because it's got a little bit of AI that sits behind it that diagnoses that sort of stuff, and it brings it forward. We also deal in a new currency called happiness. So within our system, there's an algorithm that runs away in the background that gives users a happiness score, which gives organisations a collated happiness score. And when we first started using it, we thought it was a bit cheesy, and we thought we'd have to change the name of it, and we thought people wouldn't like it. But actually, one of the things that people really resonates really well with people, because it's a measure within their organisation and across their people at a personal level, and that kind of drives it through. So one of the key things with the GoBox system is it isn't anonymous. So there's a myriad of survey tools that you can adopt across your organisation. And we probably all get a bit overrun with them at the moment. So we could get a survey about a myriad of things. Traditionally, we used to get the annual employee engagement survey. That was probably the equivalent of taking a bath once a year, and it was very organisational focused. It took a long time to fill out. And most organisations that get involved in that type of process, and most large organisations do, if they're very, very honest, the biggest conversation they have about it is how many people have filled it out, not necessarily the content that comes from it, because that content won't land for 2 or 3 months. It'll be at a very high level. It's great insight to know that 20% of your organisation feel a certain way, but actually it's really, really helpful if you know exactly who the 20% are, so that you can offer them support, so that you can actually target that support, so that you can use your limited resources in a targeted way and not blanket activity across everybody. And that's really where GoBox comes into its stride, and that's what sets us apart from survey tools or employee engagement and those sorts of things. So the process is very simple, because one of the things that, probably the only thing that I brought to the table at the start really was, yes, I've led people for 20, 25 years, but that comes with a huge pressure and responsibility. And actually, it's just human nature to look for the easiest, simplest way to do stuff. So if you sent me a load of data, I'd probably fall over and not really be that interested. If you sent me insights in a really easy way to interpret, then actually that's something I can do. I can do something with that. It's very simple. 4 or 5 salient things that I need to do, and I can go away and act on those, because I'm a people-facing person. So the process works really simply. So the user receives an invite to check in. That is received via their email account. There are some huge GDPR hurdles that we've had to go through over the years. So we had the perfect timing for a wellbeing mental health tool and support, but terrible timing when it comes down to data and stuff like that. But we've passed with flying colours any of the data security processes we've had to go through, because some organisations will run their own bespoke ones. The NHS, for example, it is military grade data security, and we are Cyber Essentials approved. So the one thing we do need to run our system is the user's email addresses. Now, in organisations that have their own email address, that's pretty straightforward. For organisations like your local rugby clubs and your sports clubs, or even maybe your schools, where your contact might be through their personal email address, we also run a kind of a pre-validation kind of opt-in stage at the start, which is GDPR compliant, so that people can opt into the service. when they receive their check-in, it takes about 30 seconds. It's absolutely designed to run on one of these things like tap, 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 and gone. If it can't be done with a thumb, it can't be done is kind of a bit of the mantra around that. It takes about 30 seconds to complete. They don't have to sign in because it's all personalised to them through the process anyway. They answer a set of non-intrusive questions that are designed by experts. So we've had these questions designed by leadership experts. We've had support across all of the organisations that we've gone live in. NHSX, Mind in Mid Hearts have been absolutely fantastic with us as well. And when you get to start to see some of the questions, you can see exactly kind of the sort of things that, the sort of approach that we have and the way that we start to pull out information. So as one example, we know that online bullying can be pretty damaging for people's mental health. And there's more and more of it that goes on. So rather than ask people a question that says, are you being bullied online? We ask a lot softer version. So things like, do you feel comfortable with the way people interact with you on social media? Or things like, do you feel safe online? And the responses to those trigger the ability to prioritize a conversation, because if someone responds negatively to that question, that becomes a red flag. The leadership and the support network see that red flag and they can act on it and they can start a conversation. And that conversation can sometimes be something, it can sometimes be nothing, it can sometimes be everything, but at least the conversation is started. You, and when we say you, whoever in your organisation that you want to receive this insight, so in a company organisation, it's usually the line manager. In a social sports club, it's usually some kind of nominated wellbeing support, and we work really closely with Mind in Mid Hearts particularly around supporting those organisations that need that next level of training to be able to have that conversation, and they've got some fantastic training like all the Mind organisations do. And then really you know who requires your support and in what key areas. And this is where I kind of use the example again that it doesn't replace anything that you do now or that you would do in the future. It just helps you identify in your sphere of influence who is your first kind of contact. Where are you going to make your biggest difference? Who really needs your support and in what way? As I mentioned, this process runs normally on a monthly basis. When we first started, we got really excited and we thought this would be a weekly thing. We very quickly found that it wasn't. People don't want to be pestered all the time. And actually, the support network behind it at the organisation need time to react to the responses and carry out the necessary support. So we landed on a very nice monthly programme. With schools, we actually tie that up slightly differently, linked into the term time. So going back to school, around Christmas, around things like Mother's Day and Father's Day. So although there's not a specific question in there, but there's a lot of students who have bereaved parents. So that's a key time for people's happiness to take a dip, run up to exams and those sorts of things. The best example I can share with you on here about exactly how this works was the incident that led to our tagline that we use that says prioritise the conversations that matter, and that was with one of our very first clients. So we rolled out to a new client, couple of hundred employees, pretty classic kind of organisation. They covered a large section of a couple of counties, so the local manager was remote to his workforce. The local manager had about 15 people work under him. The business do a technical job, so they're in customers' homes doing a technical job. And out of the blue, we've been live with them for about 3 or 4 months. Out of the blue, I got a phone call from a chap who said, "Look, Richard, I just want to thank you for getting the GoVox wellbeing tool into our organisation." So I'm quite a kind of glib guy off the cuff. I said, "Yeah, no problem. They did pay us, but brilliant." He said, "I want to kind of take you through kind of what's happened." So this is great. So we had a great conversation, and he shared with me, and the catalyst for this event is terrible, and I refer back to the support available at the start of this call if this triggers anything with anybody of any concern, and I apologise if it does. But the leader kind of shared with me that they've been using the tool for 2 or 3 months. In their organisation, they have regular quarterly one-to-ones, but he was very honest and a bit like a lot of organisations that we all come across. He said, "We're very busy and they're the first things that slide out of the diary. So we kind of got to meet our customers' needs. And quite often we can go a long time without actually physically seeing our people." he noticed on the tool that one of his team just, in his words, just wasn't looking himself. His happiness score had dropped down. Some of the responses to his questions were raising concern. So the chap said to me, the line manager said to me, look, I prioritised the conversation that mattered that week. And it was a real light bulb moment for me. So I said, hang on a minute, I'm just going to write that down, because we've been looking for a bit of a tagline to go with our company logo that kind of explains what we do. But he prioritised the conversation that mattered that week. He rang the chap up and he said, look, I'm in your area on Wednesday. He lived about an hour and a half away from the chap that worked for him. He said, I'm in your area on Wednesday. Do you fancy meeting up for a coffee and a chat? So the first reaction from the chap was, well, what have I done wrong? And the guy was like, no, nothing. I just want time to catch up, really. So he met him in a generic coffee shop. There's loads of them around, as we know. And he sat down with the guy and he said to me, look, I just started using my usual leadership management techniques, just asking some open questions. And the catalyst for that conversation, the reason why he prioritised it was the GoVox wellbeing check-in, but actually the impact afterwards was down to him as a good leader and his organisation as a good organisation. So used open questions, made the guy feel comfortable, and actually found out that, and this is the difficult kind of starting scenario, but the young guy's sister had recently been raped, and the guy was just struggling to deal with the whole scenario. So a terrible event, and the manager obviously couldn't do anything as part of that. But his employee was really visibly visibly and physically and mentally kind of impacted by it. So the chap was struggling to deal with it. Now the manager said to me, Richard, I've had, bizarrely, one of the best weeks as a leader, because as soon as we were aware of that as an organisation, we were able to put support in for him, his family, his sister as well, because we've got access to those support networks. We've been able to make a difference this week into that individual's life. He will never go and work anywhere else. He thinks this is the best place to work ever, because we've been able to support him and we recognised his issue. But he said, in all honesty, Richard, let me take you through what would have happened if we hadn't been using the GoVox wellbeing check-in. The guy was really struggling and he probably was very close to going off sick. And the manager was very honest. He said, we've got a process for that. If he's off sick too long, we'll get rid of him. The guy does a technical job in people's homes. And actually, if he's not concentrating on what he does, he could have left a pretty serious safety incident. So one of the outcomes of that could have been someone could have got hurt. But actually, if he left a safety incident, they've got a process for that, and it would have involved them getting rid of him. Or actually, he could have, do you know what, we're all human, he could have just reacted negatively to a customer. But you can imagine what the process is that they got for that. They would have got rid of him. So that story for me, that was at the very start of our journey, and it really empowered us and kind of gave us the enthusiasm to know that we're making a difference. And across those 250,000 check-ins in 2019, and I think we're close to 300, 400,000 now in 2020, we know that unfortunately there are more cases like that sit within our responses. But we also know that people are here today because of the support they received afterwards. And that's something that really drives us and makes us incredibly proud. So that's the process and how it works. You can see on here, and you'll see a little picture of a mobile phone. This is kind of just a little bit of a mock-off of what it looks like. The guys at Heart Sports Partnership actually use it for their organisation as well. We've got a set of questions. We've got huge sets of questions now, actually, because every time we start with a new organisation, we learn something new. And actually, different organisations use slightly different language. So we can customise this at an organisation level. But this gives you an example, as I mentioned earlier, about some of the questions that we use to pull out some of the specific kind of concerns around mental health and wellbeing. General enjoyment. Feel I've got to spend a good amount of time with my colleagues this week. Now, that's probably not as relevant in COVID because it's not as much face-to-face time, but we also use some questions around connectivity there, because really what we're trying to pull through there is that we know that loneliness is a big driver of mental health and wellbeing challenges. But we wouldn't want to ask someone, do you feel lonely? Because that's a little bit intrusive and it's a little bit kind of naff. But we will ask questions around, do you feel you've got a good support network around you? Do you, with the student one, we actually use a question that goes along the lines of, do you feel you've got a good bunch of mates? Stuff like that is really important to kind of pull through. Obviously on here, in this example, there's a great one here we use with corporate organisations if they want to use it. that if you received the same financial package to work for another company doing the same job, how likely is it you would move? Now, you might not think that's a well-being mental health question, but we've excluded money out of the question. We've excluded doing the job. So really it's about the environment that the person works in. And most organisations would have a process for this, and it's called the exit interview. But actually at that point, your talent is leaving. They're giving you the keys back to the office or the car, and they're off, and you've lost them. And actually, wouldn't it have been better if 3, 6, 9, 12 months earlier, you had an inkling that they were thinking of leaving? Now, this question is brilliant, actually, because bearing in mind the system isn't anonymous, and some people think, oh, my organisation might have an issue with that because people feel scared to speak up. We get a really high engagement rate. People know it's not anonymous. They know who sees the results, whether it be their line manager or their support network, and they know kind of where that support kind of is going to come from. Now, something like 20% of people that use this question across a wide range of organisations, 21% of people, say they are likely or very likely to move, knowing that their line manager or their organisation are going to see that response and know who said it. So that actually builds real confidence for us that people don't worry about the lack of anonymity around the system. And you can see there, I'm not going to read them all out there, but sleep, things rarely bother me. That's not saying to someone, do you feel anxious? That's kind of really kind of put out some of those things. Would you like to see your manager? And obviously in some cases it's not a manager, it's would you like to catch up with someone during the day? That's a really good question as well. Every check-in finishes with an ability to leave a verbatim comment at the end, which really personalises it, and you get some kind of brilliant insights out of that as you kind of go through. Apologies, I think someone's trying to buzz to get in, but hopefully it's not disturbing the call. Just a couple of screenshots here on the leader's view, because obviously it's great to check in with people. It's great to have a brilliant set of questions. It's great to have a really high engagement rate with the check-in process. But actually, it's about what you do with it afterwards, that the power is in the system. So this is where we've designed it incredibly simply for users. And one of my kind of requests on this call is that I'd love to link up with as many of you as possible to kind of continue this conversation moving forward, to see if there's an option for us to support you in your organisation, or if there is an opportunity. So I'm being distracted here. Matt, can you just, sorry. If there's an opportunity in your organisation to kind of support you moving forward. So the dashboard is created really simply because one of the things we didn't want to do was create a load of data for people to make them kind of fall over when they see it. It's a login, it's password protected, so it's data secure. You see your response rates, you see red flags to the answers. So what you would see is that I feel safe online. If you've checked in with 25 people and 6 people are red flagged, you can then click on that red flag and you can see exactly who those people are. The happiness score on the report we've turned into a very simple bar chart. The longer the bar chart, the happier people are. The shorter the bar chart, the less happy. And when you click on each bar, you get the full answers from the individual, and then you get the verbatim comments at the end of it. Absolutely key to it. It takes about a minute for a leader or for a support function to kind of review the report, identify the 2 or 3 conversations that they need to have, and kind of move forward from there. At an organisational level, with large organisations, we can also supply some kind of rolled up reporting, which isn't a personal level. There's no names involved, but it starts to give percentages and trends around some of the key areas that are in there. So a couple of things around what we see from organisations and the feedback we get. And I apologise, I've rattled on for almost 45 minutes, so hopefully you're still with me. We'll get this pack sent round as well at the end. What we see is an increase in happiness from users on our happiness score of about 10% within the first 3 months, which is absolutely brilliant and really helps us kind of validate with future clients the kind of benefits that they'll get through from it. And really the kind of 4 areas underneath are the key benefits you get from the system, and hopefully that's kind of come across already. So the red flags help you allocate the support. So that's the red flags. If someone in your team is struggling in a certain area, you will know who they are. You will be able to pick up the phone to them. You'll be able to arrange the next step, whether that's just a conversation to find out more, and you'll be able to support them moving forward from there. it gives you light bulb moments. So you'll get some moments within there that are actually not even related to well-being, or particularly in the verbatim comments, people really open up. And that's that kind of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media stuff that kind of pulls through. And then you can nurture your team through positive change. And actually, I probably should cross that word out and use negative change as well. So we've got organisations that have been using our tool for a number of years now. One organisation jumps to mind particularly as an example where they had to put a change in on their pension scheme. Now, they knew that people wouldn't be happy about that. They had no real way of measuring it. There wasn't a question in the wellbeing check-in that addressed it. But actually, bizarrely, but probably not bizarrely because it's designed on people's happiness, we could have told them on what day they announced it because their happiness score dropped through the floor. But what they were able to do was use that happiness score as a benchmark to get back to normal. So they knew when they got through the particular challenge of that organisation. And we're seeing that more and more now through COVID. Obviously, massive disruption in people's lives. We've supported a lot of organisations in making sure people are comfortable working from home and have the right support and the right equipment, because you want to know who doesn't specifically in your organisation. And then actually in the last couple of weeks and months, supporting people in how they want to go back to work and how they want that shaped within their organisation. So really able to personalise the support. And it helps people shine because it gives you a direct view into all of your people at a real personal level throughout the whole process. So this is the last slide. As you can see, just to give you a bit of confidence, we are trusted by a growing number of organisations and some pretty serious players in there. And when we started, if I'd got a bit of paper out with the team that started this and said, you know what, here's a list of names that I want to be backing kind of what we do and endorsing what we do and loving what we do, if I'd written some of these down, people would have told me I was absolutely mental and kind of go away and have a word with yourself and come back with a bit of a lesser ambition. But we would love the opportunity to continue this conversation and see how we can support you, your teams and your people, your partners as well. So I know we've got some of the other partnerships on the call. We get a lot of support from Heart Sports Partnership connecting us with conversations. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And I'm probably going to, I don't know if we've had any questions come through on the chat. Ollie's been on there. Hopefully I haven't bored people to tears and we've still got good numbers on there. So shall I pass back and hopefully that hasn't been a terrible trauma for everybody?
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. That was really good and very informative. So like we said, there's still some time for questions. So Ollie and Richard are here with us for another 10 minutes. So if there's anything you would like to ask, please feel free to drop it in the group chat.
Or indeed any feedback, because obviously we always look to do these things better and make sure we get the message out there. Or maybe everyone's just asleep.
There's always an opportunity to send your questions later in. You can use my email address or contact Richard directly. Okay, we have got a question.
I think Claire's just put a question up there. So getting an idea of costs for schools. Great question, Claire. So if I was to kind of broadly cover the cost question, because obviously it is a big is a big consideration for everybody. One thing we try and make sure that we do is make sure that budgets and commercial decisions aren't a barrier to people getting the support. So broadly, our model for schools works out at £5 per user for a whole year, and it's a fully managed service. So when we started into schools, we were a little bit naive, like we probably are with every new organisation, but we thought that we'd be a great support for the students. And actually, we found out that we were. The students get a huge amount of support from our tool. But the group that I had no experience with was actually the teachers. So in the schools that we're live with, we actually check in with the staff as well. And I think on balance, they probably get as much support and triggers through from the staff. It's not an environment that I've ever worked in, and getting closer to it, it's probably not an environment I ever probably would want to work in, to be fair. And if I'm honest, it's incredibly stressful. and some great people working in schools and supporting students. So yeah, so idea of cost for schools, if you based it on £5 per user, so if you had a school of 500 people, multiply it by £5, and that's for the full year, and it's a fully managed service. So there's not often too many barriers when you're looking at those sorts of levels. Just to give everyone an idea as well, outside of schools, in the more kind of corporate organisations, we run pretty much at a £10 per user level, because what we try to do is make sure we can get into as many schools and children and teachers as possible. And then obviously the corporate organisations, I kind of use the line that if we don't care about our people enough for £10 a year, we're probably in the wrong game. But I do appreciate there are considerations. Some of our organisations have got 5, 6, 10, 12,000 people that work within them. So we can certainly have a commercial conversation at each organisational level as well. Hopefully that helped answer the question, Claire. No problem. Any kind of feedback or thoughts from anybody? So Christine, there is no minimum size organisation. So we have organisations, as I say, with 12,000 plus people. We have organisations with, I think our smallest is about 8. Realistically, you're looking at 5 people and above. There is no minimum. At the end of the day, whether you've got 5 people that are in your organisation or 5,000, the need to connect with them is still the same, and the pressure on the leadership is still the same.
Any more questions from anyone?
It's just that awkward silence, isn't it? Hopefully everybody enjoyed it anyway. Ollie will probably give me some feedback later, tell me I bored everyone, but I've got broad shoulders, I can get over that.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time, Richard. It's been great having you. And
thanks for everyone for their time. It's been a pleasure, and I do hope it's been of some value. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. We'll see you shortly in the next webinar. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.